Hi, everybody. I'm Marcus.
And I'm Letitia.
And this is your marriage tip for today.
Today's marriage tip is submit to your own spouse.
Right. Submitting to your own spouse. Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 21 talks about how we are to submit ourselves to one another.
Mm-hmm. So that's a big part, that one another part, because a lot of times people take this whole submission thing to mean that, the wife is the only one that's supposed to be doing all the submission.
Right.
It's submitting. But it works both ways. The wife has to submit to her husband, but the husband also has to submit to his wife.
Right. So we tell couples that the wife submits to the husband's lead, but the husband is to submit to the wife's need. Mm-hmm. And that works a whole lot better when you are submissive to the person that you married. People say, well, if they just did this, then it'd be easier for me to submit. Or if he just did this, I'd submit to him. Or if she would actually just do this for me, I would be more apt to submit to her needs. No, if they don't act right.
Yeah, you still have to submit. Because that verse didn't say, submit if he acts right. Or if he, does what you want him to do. No, it just says submit, period. Right.
So that means you submit to your own spouse, not your idea of what your spouse ought to be. Mm-hmm. You don't submit to somebody else's spouse. You say, why would I submit to somebody else's spouse? Anytime you compare your spouse to somebody else, you're submitting yourself to somebody else or not submitting to your own spouse. Right. So case in point, you could be having an argument with your wife and you could say, well, such and such's wife does it for him. I don't see why you don't do it for me. Well, wait a minute. Who did you marry?
Yeah, who are you submitting to?
Right. Did you marry such and such's wife? No, you didn't marry them. So you have no business submitting to such and such's wife, even in your imagination, or in trying to compare your wife to them. You just don't do that. Submit to your own spouse.
Whenever you're reading scripture, you have to pay attention to all the words.
Right.
So I think, God, thought it was important to put, that small word own in there because obviously he knew that you would try to submit to somebody else's spouse.
You're trying to submit to someone else other than your own spouse when you find yourself comparing. Don't start there. Don't start comparing your spouse to somebody else. First of all, be grateful for who God gave you. And then believe the best in that individual. Everybody has their flaws, but at the end of the day, all behind stank. It's just the truth, So everybody wake up in the morning with funky breath. Nobody is exempt. So just handle that and just choose to believe the best. Another thing my wife says I think is really, really good. She says things like speak to the best in your spouse.
Yeah, because as wives, we're kingmakers. So it's up to us to pull out, the best in our husband, to, when we talk to them, not to talk down to them, but to, encourage them and, speak good words over them.
So you have to remember that your spouse rises to your confession. So if your confession is, well, you just like your crazy mama and you always getting on my nerves and you never do what I want to do and you just like your nappy-headed sister, you can't be doing that.
Right.
Because first of all, it's mean. But then second of all, you're not speaking words of affirmation for them to live up to. You know what I mean? You have to pour into them and you pour into them with your words.
Yeah, and it's hard to submit to someone that you're constantly talking down to.
Right.
And then we also have to remember that, no one's perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect spouse.
Right.
So, I mean, you're looking at your spouse thinking, well, if he act more like, my best friend's husband, it'd be easier to submit. Nobody's perfect and everyone is dealing with something.
Right. And your best friend's husband could be beating her brains out. You just don't know it.
Yeah.
So believe the best in your spouse. Speak the best to your spouse. And then, here's one. Be the best for your spouse. Don't expect them to be the best for you when you're not being the best and always putting your best foot forward for them. It's not fair. So someone said that every time you point your finger at somebody else, you got 3 more pointing back at you. Well, look at yourself and say, you know what? Am I looking my best for my spouse? Am I smelling my best for my spouse? Am I doing my best for my spouse? Am I thinking the best about my spouse? Is the best, is excellence coming up out of me? Sometimes when you consider some of that, it might temper your approach to your spouse's weaknesses. It doesn't erase them. It doesn't mean that they aren't there, but it kind of seasons your approach with a little bit more grace and tolerance, if I can say it that way. So we gave you those 3 things that you could do to submit to your own spouse, which was believe the best of them, speak to the best in them, and then be your best for them. Well, you can do all of that, but do it with a bitter attitude, or do it as a way like, you're doing it as a favor to them.
The only reason why I'm doing it is because I have to do it. Make sure your attitude is right, when you're submitting.
Right. Otherwise, it comes across as witchcraft. Like you're trying to do something to get a response out of somebody else. Mm-hmm. No, just do it out of the purity and out of the love in your heart, because you love your spouse and you want to have a satisfying marriage for the both of you. Mm-hmm. And I would venture to say that it'd be hard for anybody to repel that.
Right.
So this has been your marriage tip for today. Submit yourself to your own spouse.
If you like this video, also feel free to check out our other videos on our channel. And as always, all of our information is listed in the description box below.
Well, thanks for watching today. We look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye-bye.